and welcome to the Hibs Observer afternoon briefing with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Patrick McPartlin to discuss all the latest from Easter Road. A wee bit later than planned this afternoon, but that's what happens when you get a wee bit of breaking news. So we're going to discuss that, Ewan Henderson leaving Hibs permanently. We're going to look at last night's game and the Elgin game at the weekend. And maybe discuss a wee bit of transfers, who's been impressing, Rudi Molotnikov, Martin Boyle. All that to come today, sponsored by MPH Group and Weissman Boilers. Patrick, first things first, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, Liam. Nice to be reporting on not one but two sort of convincing wins for Hibs over the past few days. It's been a while since we've had that, so it just makes a nice change. How are you?
Fine, thanks, fine. Just kind of want to get right into the big kind of important questions and topics. Have you ever seen so many seagulls at a football game as there was at Easter Road last night? It was getting a bit ominous at one point. There was a kind of horror movie feel about it.
It was a little bit Hitchcockian, if that's a word. It is now. It was a little bit kind of Hitchcockian. It does get a bit. I think it's the fact they come right into the stand and they sort of like they'll run along the seats in front of you, and there's no fear. It's very kind of it's a bit kind of, as you say, ominous. But no, to answer your question, haven't ever seen that many seagulls. Would really like that not to be repeated again, lest there be any incidents involving what usually happens with a lot of birds and large crowds.
Yeah.
I believe it has already happened this season to other sports journalists and also other managers. Not going to name any names, wouldn't be fair. But I feel it's only a matter of time before we're caught out if this keeps up. So that's very much something I'm looking to avoid happening for obvious reasons.
Aye, agreed. A wee bit of breaking news just before we came on air today. Ewan Henderson off to Belgium. That one's been on the cards for a wee while, hasn't it? Kind of talented player, young Ewan, but it kind of didn't really work out for him at Hibs. And by all accounts, he seems to be well suited to the football over there.
Yeah, I think it's a funny one because you look at the way he was playing for Celtic and the fact that he was on Hibs' radar for a while. He was on. They were kind of watching him before Sean Maloney came in. When Sean Maloney got the job, he kind of put the deal over the line, if you like. Having worked with him when he was at Celtic, and you could sort of see why it made sense. The way that Sean Maloney wanted to play, the way that Hibs would want to play is just to have this sort of creative midfielder who's capable of kind of floating around in that kind of space between the midfield and the strikers. But I just think it didn't really ever kind of work out for him. And sometimes that happens with players at certain clubs. It just, for some players, it just clicks at certain clubs. Just to take another Scottish example, Scott Allen, another 10, just, seemed to work out for him again and again at Hibs, but didn't really have the same impact elsewhere. And it just, for some players, it just doesn't work like that. And I think Ewan Henderson was one of them. I think undoubtedly talented, undoubtedly skillful. Some of his assists, his goals, really good. But I just don't think, certainly the way that Hibs were playing at times, I think under Lee Johnson, you could sort of see him flitting in and out. Lee Johnson talked about wanting more from him. And then obviously in Nick Montgomery's, the way Nick Montgomery was playing, I think it was quite clear there wasn't going to be any space for him in that setup. And, I think it's just, as you say, worked out for him really well in Belgium. I think it's maybe like quite a coincidence given, his brother Liam is obviously taken to Italian football like a duck to water. And, maybe it's just one of those things that he's just better suited to a game elsewhere. And yeah, I think the fact that, he's done quite well in a team that for a while were struggling in the second tier. And then, in the end, I think, made a bit of a fist of it and a decent fist of it, and avoided relegation, did quite well in the cups, and obviously that's kind of brought him to the attention of other Belgian clubs. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he gets on over there. I think he has the talent and the ability to do well wherever he is. I think it depends on the sort of players he's got around him, but it wouldn't surprise me to see him catching the eye for Beerschot in the top flight. And I'd not really proving anyone wrong, because I don't think there was ever any question about his talent. It was more just how he fitted into sort of like a succession of Hibs teams. And I think he was probably one of those who was, disadvantaged by the kind of, the merry-go-round of managers at Easter Road, where, it was just changing tactics, changing formations. He couldn't really get into the team to, nail down a starting berth. So I think you'd say best of luck to him. He's obviously found somewhere where, his sort of football is appreciated or his football works out. And, like I say, it'll be interesting just to, keep an eye on him and see how he does over the course of the season.
Yeah, I'm saying there that everything went well for him over in Belgium, and I've just completely, kind of glossed over the fact that the club he went on loan to went bust last month. So it's maybe not all gone well, but it's worked out for him in the end.
It has,
yeah, Ewan Henderson off to Beershot and a permanent transfer. So it's kind of clear out continues. He probably won't be the last to leave this summer. There's already been quite a few who have moved on. But I mean, the guys who are playing at the moment have made a good start, haven't they? I mean, it's very, as the title of the video says, and we don't, we want to emphasise that it's very early days, but it might be a cliche, but it does ring true that you can only really beat what is in front of you. And so far, these two, Premier Sports Cup games have done that very convincingly. And you can't take that for granted really in this competition, because I mean, historically it's not always happened for Hibs. We've seen it for top flight sides already over the past few days, that it's not a given that you're going to kind of turn up and play these kind of sides in lower divisions and just roll them over. Motherwell get held to a draw at Montrose, Dundee United getting beat off Falkirk. So it's, I mean, you might, people might say, it's only Elgin, it's only Queen's Park, but I mean, I think Hibs do deserve a wee bit of credit, or more than a wee bit of credit, for how they've went about things so far, because it's been professional, it's been quite slick in places, it's been really hard working, the attitude's been right. So I mean, I think as David Gray was saying last night, like you can't really find much fault in those two games so far, can you?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, even looking back a couple of years ago to the Premier Sports Cup campaign under Lee Johnson, Hibs got off to a good start with a 5-0 win against Clyde at Easter Road, and you're thinking this is a good start. And then they go to Falkirk. At the time, Falkirk and Clyde were in the same division, but you'd basically say, I think, that Falkirk were above Clyde in terms of kind of pecking order in the Scottish football pyramid, much in the same way that Queen's Park are above Elgin. But as we know, Lee Johnson made a host of changes. Hibs struggled and ended up losing 1-0 at Falkirk, and then we know what happened with the rest of that League Cup campaign. So I think we'll just gloss over that very quickly. But it would have been so easy to just keep things the way they had been against Clyde and try and get the same outcome from the Falkirk game. And I do kind of get this whole point about trying to get minutes and legs, and it is an early start, but at the same time you can't really treat it like pre-season. And I think what's noticeable about this Hibs team at the moment under David Gray is that he's treated it like a serious competition, but in doing so is able to get minutes into legs. So you're getting the same outcome, but you're also getting the results. And I think that, I mean, yeah, as you say, you can only beat what's in front of you. I think Hibs maybe huffed and puffed a little bit at times against Elgin. It was only really that kind of 10, 15-minute spell in the second half where, they seemed to be scoring with every chance, and you thought, this could be a cricket score. But, there was a sort of period in the first half between the two goals where Elgin did come back into the game a little bit, and you start thinking, is this an example of the sort of Premiership teams struggling against lower league opposition in this tournament, as we've seen so often before? But credit to them, they did. They kept plugging away. They found new ways of getting to the Elgin goal, and they ran out 5-0 winners. Queen's Park at the same time, they're beating Peterhead 5-0. So then you look at that and think that's going to be a step up in opposition. And obviously, the difference in divisions as well. Queen's Park in the Championship, Elgin City in League Two. You think it's going to be a tougher test. It's going to be a chance for Hibs to kind of test themselves further. And I think David Gray made the right choice in largely sticking with the same team. Obviously, the one enforced change with Chris Cadden being out injured, but I think you could just sort of see the team picked up where they'd left off. It was, really, really sort of fast paced and really kind of attack minded from the word go. Obviously, having seen the benefits of the early goal against Elgin, I think quite keen to do the same thing again last night. And there were a lot of chances. Obviously, they didn't all go in. It could have been another. Hibs feasibly could have scored 8 or 9 goals. I think by the end had all the chances gone in. But it's I think it's the way that Hibs obviously found another gear from what they'd had against Elgin City, and that's the sort of really kind of reassuring part, I think, is that that wasn't Hibs at full speed or full whack against Elgin City. They did have somewhere else to go, and I think the only sort of black mark, if you like, was the concession of the late goal. But all in all, 10 goals scored, 1 conceded is pretty good. I think David Gray would be more than happy with that, more than happy with how the team as a whole and individually have applied themselves over the 2 games. He'll be looking for that to continue on Saturday against Kelty Hearts, who are probably looking at Hibs having scored 10 goals over 2 games with a little bit of trepidation. But I think, as you say, it's you can only play what's in front of you, but at the same time, there are banana skins in this competition. There are banana skins at this stage of the competition, and I think Hibs have done a really kind of professional job so far in the 2 games they've played. And what's been really kind of good to see is that the new signings are showing up well, like Marvin Ekpateta, Warren O'Hora. Really a really good combination at the back, both defensively but also for set pieces. I mean, both of them scored with headers over the 2 games. Anytime Hibs have a corner or a deep free kick, they're up there, they're causing chaos. Even if they're not getting to the ball, it's just sort of putting that bit of uncertainty in the opposition defence. And that's something that I think Hibs have been missing for for a few seasons, is just like having. I mean, you occasionally got it, I think, with Paul Hanlon, Will Fish. Both of them did score last season. Lewis Miller as well at the back post. There's always the chance, but it just seems more consistent now that you send the 2 of them forward for set pieces, and you've got that aerial threat. You've got that another dimension to the attack, and it's just we've talked before about the David Gray just getting the basics right with Hibs and just trying to stamp out the silly mistakes and just do the simple things well. And again, it is just 2 games. It's against lower league opposition, but I don't think there's any doubt that the performances have improved on last season. The ball's getting from back to front quicker. When they lose the ball, they're going after it. They're getting it back, and it's really at the moment it's hard to see any kind of negatives, to be honest. I think the only thing you would say from the 2 games is that it's kind of shown that Hibs don't have an awful lot in reserve. But we knew that, and we know they've only made 3 signings. There's still a long way to go in terms of the transfer window, and we know Hibs are going to be bringing in further signings over the course of the summer. But on what we've seen so far, things are going in the right direction. I think they will need to step it up for the start of the league campaign. But again, that's a good 3 weeks away, and I think just being able to work together, being able to play as a team together, and just find the combinations that work, and a style of play that works is just really paramount at the moment. And so far, so good.
Yeah, it feels a bit more aggressive in the approach. I know it can be difficult to gauge exactly when you're playing against a sort of lesser standard of opposition. And I did expect a wee bit more from Queen's Park just on that note. But I think you could see there was a real kind of concerted effort. And I think David Gray singled this out after both games, is the reaction when Hibs lose the ball. It's been to go and win it back as quickly as possible. I think when last season, I felt like we didn't see an awful lot of that. There was kind of a sort of aggression and intensity lacking in the play at times. And I think that seems to be something that David Gray has quickly implemented, and he seems to be quite happy with so far, at least. And I think another thing, and in both of these games, I think 2-0 up at Elgin at half time, and then 3 Queen's Park. I think maybe what's perhaps maybe most pleasing and top of the obvious for David Gray is that how often last season did Hibs really struggle to kill games off
weekly?
Sometimes multiple times in the same week. And again, usual caveats apply, context and everything. But in both these games, that there seems to have been a very deliberate effort to keep the foot down as the game goes on and not let it drift. I think especially the game last night, it wasn't until the kind of final stages that I felt that it really started to just sort of peter out. I think there was still quite a lot of intensity in Hibs play going forward. Very concentrated at the back. Obviously, sometimes as you make more changes, the game naturally kind of goes a little bit, maybe the cohesion, and that's going to happen. When you're 5 goals up and it's still early days. But I think that has kind of stood out to me over the 2 games. I think attitude, you can talk about attitude regardless of the opposition, because it's completely down to you. Nothing else is influencing that. The quality of the team you're playing against or whatever, that is all about what you as a team are doing. I think it's been spot on from Hibs the past couple of games. They've really went after teams, and as I said, when they're already in comfortable positions, have made a concerted effort to keep going for more goals. So, I suppose in terms of individuals, obvious Martin Boyle's been back amongst the goals. Josh Campbell, 3 assists last night. But I think, who stole the show was young Rudi Molotnikov, 18 years old, making his first start at Easter Road and getting a first goal. It was a kind of as good a night as he could have hoped for, really, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah. And when you consider the, nearly 6 months to the day he made his, made that appearance against Forfar from the start up at Station Park, and maybe a little bit harsh to pin it all on him because of how Hibs were playing at the time as a team, but and we'd been sort of advocating, or I'd certainly been advocating for him to get a start. Actually wrote an entire article about it, and was then proven right, which was nice. But I think you could see he was very clearly like a young boy who was trying to play football in a first team, and couldn't really get into the game, couldn't really get it by the scruff of his neck, and it was a little bit. It was disappointing, but not that it wasn't a case of him not taking his chance. It was a case of just like the circumstances maybe weren't quite right, and I think he obviously he came on as a sub in a couple of games, but last night was kind of like, and Elgin as well, to be fair. Here is a player who has gone away, has worked hard, and has come back a first team player. That feels like the kind of the highest honour you can pay to a teenager who's come into the first team. Is, do they look out of place? And if they don't, that's a heck of a tribute. And I think that's the sort of that's what we've seen with Molotnikov. I didn't think it was a huge surprise that he started at Elgin, and I think based on his performance there, you think, well, he doesn't deserve to be taken out of the team. And if you consider, like, I know obviously Ellie Yuan had been ill for the weekend, hadn't travelled to the northeast, but to keep a player like Ellie Yuan out of the team is also a heck of a tribute to Molotnikov, but also says a lot for David Gray that he's putting his trust in this player who, is still young, still has a lot to learn, but over the course of the 2 appearances at Elgin and then last night, I think you wouldn't be taking him out of the team anytime soon. Yeah. I just think it's worth remembering this is a player who was playing for the under-18s when he was still 15. Like this, this isn't sort of some kind of. Yes, it's quite a rapid rise, but it's not been kind of overnight. It has been, I think there's been a player in there for quite a while, and obviously, a lot of caps for Scotland. Scotland youth teams, sort of under 16, under 17, and just having that. Physically, he looks ready for playing every week in the first team. He's got that eye for goal. He was up against a really experienced defender as well in Cammy Kerr, and just didn't give him a moment's rest. Just, you think this is somebody who's had, bags of experience at Dundee, who is being kind of, sent to the shops time and time again by, somebody who just turned 18 a couple of months ago. And, I think it's exciting to think of, what, Rudi could still do in this Hibs team. But it's also nice because when you consider, I know Nick Montgomery, gave young players, their debut and made a big thing about wanting to, bring more players through from the academy, which is admirable and, absolutely not something, to sort of hold against them. But I think, when you look at the likes of Rudi, you look at Kanai Omegwa, you've got Rory Whittaker on the scene, you've got, a whole host of other boys who've been in and around it as well. Maybe haven't had, that many chances, or as many chances, I should say, in the first team, but they're kind of on the edge, kind of on the cusp there or thereabouts. That's kind of what Hibs need to be getting back to, because for so long, Hibs are kind of dining out on, the golden generation. And then after a while, you think, well, what next? What happened?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you look at Josh Doig and you look at Ryan Porteous, but beyond that, there's obviously been players who've come through. I mean, I think you look at the number of players who are still playing football either in, the SPFL or possibly the Lowland League, leagues elsewhere. A heck of a lot of players who've come through the Hibs Academy are still playing football, which is a kind of testament to the academy itself. But at the same time, you want to be seeing them getting a chance in the first team at Hibs. You want to see them, doing it for Hibs, and then maybe getting their move like Doig, like Porteous. Because you think of players like Ollie Shaw, Jamie Gullen, Fraser Murray, players who kind of threatened to be like the next, not the next big thing, but like maybe the next sort of product of the conveyor belt, and it just didn't quite happen for them. But I think you look at Hibs at the moment, and there are quite a few sort of possibilities that you think, with the right sort of coaching, the right encouragement, and the fact that they've got the right mindset as well. Again, as the title of the video says, it's early days, but you do wonder if we are going to start seeing more academy sort of products coming through and into the Hibs first team, because Jacob McIntyre, Ruben McAllister, Josh Landers, there's a lot of players who are there or thereabouts, and I think if they see the fact that David Gray is giving Rudi Molotnikov a chance to go out and do, basically do what he did last night, do what he did on Saturday, then that's sort of incentive for them to think, if I work hard, if I keep the head down, then I can attract attention of the coach. I can, get in the first team. I can get my chance. And then that filters down through the rest of the academy, because the rest of the academy players are seeing that. And, the 14 and 15-year-olds who at the moment are playing for the under-18 see that and think, well, that could be me in a couple of years. And, that's sort of like the best. I think that's probably the best sort of, example for them to have is, looking at players that they've played with at academy level, getting their chance. And not just getting their chance, but taking it and impressing. And, it's, like I say, I think it's exciting to see what Rudi will go on to do. I would imagine all being well, we'll be starting again against Kelty Hearts. And, I think it's just sort of where he goes from here, I think. He's obviously a very grounded guy. He's not getting carried away. He knows there's still, a lot of work to do, a long way to go. But, it's a good start.
Yeah, I was certainly impressed with him. I mean, the first time I got any sort of look at him was back in that game at Forfar. Nobody played well that day, but he got a bit lost in it was the most congested midfield I've ever seen that day, and he got a bit lost in it. He looked like a sort of kid who'd been asked to step up and maybe wasn't. It was maybe a wee bit unfair on him that day. But I think the difference between back then and now was quite stark. Obviously he's played in a team that has over the last couple of games functioned a bit more efficiently, a bit better. But, and again, tapping the sign again, it's very early days, but he looks as though he's ready to make an impact. David Gray was saying that he's kind of got a wee bit of physicality about him. He's affecting things more in training now. He's affecting things in games, and I think, you can only kind of go off like initial impressions, but he does look like a kind of very natural footballer. Everything seems quite smooth and easy when he's on the ball. He's all kind of low centre of gravity, dropping shoulders. I know he is right-footed, but I don't think when you're watching him, I don't think it's immediately apparent that he's very right-footed. He seems quite comfortable off of both sides, and he just seemed very comfortable all round in the team. I think sometimes when young players come in, and even if they're doing well in the game, you can still detect a wee bit of nervous energy in everything that they're doing. That they can be a wee bit manic, a wee bit all over the place, even if they are doing good things. But I don't really see that with Molotnikov over these last couple of games. He looks quite composed. As I said, everything seems quite smooth. His technique's clean. He passes the ball well. He picks up good positions. So I think it's been a kind of real positive of the last two games, I think, to have a young player come in and do that and look so assured. Again, you'll need to see, you don't expect him to play every week, and we do expect Hibs are going to add more in that attacking line. But it's certainly looking over the last couple of games that he is ready to make some sort of contribution. It is down to him how much of a contribution that's going to be. And it's kind of good to see, a kind of young kid pushing, because he'll know that there's, he'll know himself that, there will be other players coming in, but he's getting his chance just now before that happens, and he kind of looks every bit like he's determined to take it, because I think when you come into the team as a forward player, I think more so than other positions on the pitch, that you really have to go out and try and affect the game. I think if you're a young defender coming in, or say a young holding midfielder, you can maybe get away with a sort of safer performance, just being steady, because that's more what you're kind of asked of you in those positions. But if you're coming in at the top of the pitch, it's kind of on you to not be passive, to impact the game, to affect it. And you can see that he was clearly trying to do that, in terms of, he's not just taking easy options. He's, if he wants to hold on to the ball a wee bit longer, he's not just popping off a backwards or sideways pass. He's comfortable holding on to it because he knows he can protect it and look and try and make something to happen as well. And again, it's a difficult balance, that as well, because how many times do you see young players they're so desperate to make something happen that you can tell that they're trying too hard. They're trying things that aren't on. So he struck that balance quite well over these two games as well. And I mean, it's just kind of quite a few reasons to be positive about him. So let's hope we can we'll see more of him heading forward. I do expect him, injury fitness permitting, to start again at the weekend. And as David Gray seems delighted with him as well. So a positive to take there. Martin Boyle back among the goals as well. He's looking fit and sharp, isn't he?
He is. I'd almost go as far as to say he looks a totally different player to last season. And I suspect, part of that was coming back from the injury. I don't think he was... I'm not sure he fully kind of appreciated being kind of, moved from like the wing to up front under Nick Montgomery. And again, as was the case with Dylan Vente, as was the case with other players, it was more out of necessity than anything else. But I think and again, it's, as you say, we're tapping the sign. It is early days, but I mean, he scored the goal against PAOK in the friendly in the Netherlands. He obviously assisted Josh Campbell's goal in the first friendly. And, it's just looked really, really kind of, I suppose, back to his best almost. And I think, we spoke to him in the Netherlands at the training camp, and he was basically saying, I'm not going anywhere. I'm sticking around at Hibs. And, he was very sort of keen to point out that he felt he hadn't been at his best, and he knew that there had to be more from him and more from the team. I think one of the sort of most notable things about the David Gray era so far is that, the players are saying this, and Gray saying this himself, that, last season is over and it happened and we're not dwelling on it. And, I think the only time really that we've heard a player say anything about that is Boyle basically saying we weren't good enough as a team and I wasn't good enough individually. And that's what I'm trying to rectify this season. And, to be fair, he's made a damn good start. He looks like, his sort of usual happy self, just terrorising defences. I mean, scoring an overhead kick last night. It's, it does sort of seem like, I mean, he is sort of a talismanic player for Hibs. We've said this, and, time and time again, but we just didn't see enough of it last season. Now, there could be all manner of reasons for that. I suspect there probably were. But, whether it's David Gray just getting the best out of him, whether it's, Boyle being fitter, happier, whatever, it is sort of like playing with, a different player, I would suspect. It certainly looks like that. Because I think, last season there were questions about, has he still got his pace? Has he still got his trickery? And, you think, well, yeah, maybe he doesn't. Like, there were times he looked a bit jaded. I haven't seen any evidence of that so far this season.
Yeah.
Whether it was in the friendly matches, whether it's been in the first two games. I think we're by law supposed to call him a live wire when we're writing about him in the match reports and things. But that is what he is. And I mean, you look at the other players in the team. You look at what Ellie Yuan can bring. Saw last night in his brief substitute appearance. That ridiculous flick of the run, and then the shot that cannon back off the post. You think that could have been a contender for goal of the season in game 2. See what he's got. We're talking about Rudi Molotnikov and his impact. We're talking about Josh Campbell. We're talking about Joe Newell, Nathan Mariah Welsh, the new signings. There's so many players are doing so many good things. But Martin Boyle is somebody who's just stepped up, and I think he could be, could have a big say in whether or not Hibs have a very good season or just a good season. And on the evidence so far, I think it bodes well. I think I think just keep him in his favoured position and just let him terrorise defences and score goals. And what more do you need?
Yeah, I think that one with you, and I don't think it's much an exaggeration. I think if that had gone in, it probably might have been up with some of the best goals that I've seen live. Just for the flick initially, it was brilliant, and then it was so close to capping it off. But he kind of looked, as though he'd a bit of he wanted to go out and show something. Yuan, obviously, he's come on for young Rudi, who's probably been the best player on the pitch, and he's probably come on and been like, right, well, I'm going to show what I can do now. He had that kind of feel that even though the result and everything was tied up, it's like he was determined to make something happen, which, I think, regardless of what happens with him now, between now and the end of the transfer window, he seems as though he's, on last night's evidence, he's still kind of, tuned in and wanting to make an impact.
Yeah, I mean, David Gray said that at the weekend, or not the weekend, when was it? Monday? What day are we on? Wednesday, yes.
Somebody tell us. We don't know.
Too many games in too short a space of time. At some point, David Gray was speaking about him. Now, I think it was on Monday, because obviously he hadn't played at the weekend. We were asking in the press conference, is he fit? Will he play? And just, how is he doing? Because there's been a lot of noise and speculation about his future. And, I think we've seen that with players before. It can kind of get to them. It can get inside their head. They can get inside their own head. And you can tell that they're not themselves. But I think, David Gray went to great lengths to say, that he's still a Hibs player and he's still putting in 100% because that's what is expected at the club. And, I think on last night's evidence, he's right. I think, there's a couple of things at play here. One of them would be Yuan thinking, there's an 18-year-old who's got the nod ahead of me, and obviously he had been ill. It's possible he wasn't fit to start anyway. But as you say, regardless of where his future lies, if he's sort of seen an 18-year-old getting picked over him, then he must think, right, well, I need to do a bit more to ensure that that's not happening.
Yeah. And,
you talk about, new players coming in, especially in the attacking third, and how that would affect Molotnikov. But, I don't think age or experience comes into it. If you are doing the business, if you're playing consistently well, then it doesn't matter who you are, where you've come from, what your background is, what your experience is. If somebody's playing better than you, then, they've got the shirt and it's your job to kind of challenge them and take it off them. And that's something that we didn't really have last season in this Hibs team. There was like a clearly defined, if everyone was fit, which they rarely were, there was like a clearly defined starting 11 and subs. And, I think we did sort of touch on this a fair bit, and sort of say, like, there's not, obviously Josh Campbell went through that period of being out injured, didn't have Jake Doyle-Hayes, Luke Amos had that period out, Chris Cadden was obviously missing for the first half of the season, Lewis Miller was out, the list goes on. But I feel, even with the squad being a few players short of Scottish Premiership ready, if you like, we're still seeing evidence that, players are pushing each other. Now, I know you look at the bench last night and, obviously Luke Amos comes off the bench, Dylan Levitt comes off the bench, also scores a good goal. Ellie Yuan comes off the bench. But, like, the good thing for David Gray is that there's not really a drop-off in the performances. It's not as if, this is a starting 11 and anyone we bring off the bench is going to kind of bring things down a bit. It's the same intensity, it's the same level of performance, and that's what you need. That's what you want. You want players pushing each other. You want there to be a healthy competition for places, as well as like a really good sort of squad morale, which is quite clearly there. I think players competing for places, but also encouraging each other to sort of be the best they can is only going to bring out the best in every player there, and is going to give David Gray and the coaching staff exactly what they want, which is a competitive team fighting for places and a really tough decision to make, before every game, who gets the starting berth. Because it's, you look at football in the 21st century and it's not about what's my strongest starting 11. It's what's the best team to start with and what's the best team to finish with. because with the sort of like the increased numbers of subs and the fact that games are going on longer now, it becomes almost just as important to sort of pick which subs you're going to bring on and when to impact the game as it is, what your starting 11 is. So that's sort of ticking every box for David Gray at the moment. And, I think with, a few quality additions in certain areas, that'll just get, even stronger. And that's what you want going into the start of the league season. Because obviously, he's spoken about Hibs winning a trophy, and he's spoken about the League Cup being a really good chance for them to do that. And, as we've seen for the first two games in the sort of group stages, he's not taking it lightly. But, the Scottish Premiership is a different kettle of fish. And, I think it'd be so easy to sort of be in some sort of disarray when you're going into the League Cup games and just thinking, well, we've got, 75% of a squad. We've got guys who aren't sure if they're going to be here at the end of the transfer window or at the start of the league season. But, to his credit and to the players' credit, they've, it's been like a really professional job so far. And, I think it bodes really well going into the remainder of the League Cup group games, but also going into the start of the season. And you think you've got so many players pushing for, pushing for places, pushing for a starting berth, or, pushing to be the man who gets the nod to come on and say, look, we need a goal, or, we need to tighten up at the back. Go and do it.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's a good point in terms of there is when you're in the kind of rebuild phase and there's uncertainty around players and you need players in, it can be quite easy for those narratives if things aren't going well to become, to just dominate the agenda. But Hibs have, again, it's 2 games, but what they've done quite well so far is keep focus on what's happening on the pitch. Everybody knows that new signings are needed, and new signings, we expect will be arriving. But I think if you're doing the business on the pitch, it stops, as I said, those kind of narratives taking hold, the potential for disarray, as you said. So it keeps, that's another positive of just being professional about these League Cup games when we know that it can be so easy for it not to pan out this way. Just question from Laidlaw, Jock. 2 positive performances, very quiet on the transfer front though. Should we expect any this week? I mean, it'll not be quiet behind the scenes. We know that for a fact. The work is ongoing, and I think it kind of all levels. You were kind of getting to the sort of stage of the summer where, things will probably start to pick up, where other clubs who are maybe have players that are potentially going to leave, they want to get their own house in order first, and it can be like a sort of domino effect at times. So, I mean, we know that Hibs are in the market for another forward. It's kind of patently obvious that that's needed. You've got Dylan Vente up there, potentially Harry McCurdy as an option, but Hibs do, they need more. Kieran Bowie, Fulham's Scotland under-21 international, that's a name that's been floating around. We are kind of, Hibs are keeping an eye on that one, but I think as far as we know, he's kind of also been kind of offered around to other Scottish clubs as well. So, I mean, it's potentially could become an option, that one, but it's definitely a forward. A forward's definitely on the agenda, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. We've seen that. It sounds a bit daft this after we've just seen Hibs score 10 goals in 2 games, but, it is clear that they do need, whatever happens with LUM, like they do need more up there. Just something a bit different. I think, Dylan Vente is a certain type of centre forward. I think what Hibs are missing is, just somebody a bit, I suppose, like a kind of target man type, because I don't think Dylan Vente is that sort of player. I think we saw that against Elgin, where his strengths lie. But, even just then, like, the big thing for me is that David Gray has spoken repeatedly about this sort of like flexibility, adaptability, and players having dual roles. So, if you can get somebody who can play sort of anywhere across the front 3, then, that obviously makes sense. Kieran Bowie is a good example. You look at, his sort of past so far, it kind of goes down that route that Hibs used to have, that they then moved away from, where, it's sort of like hoovering up young Scottish talent from other teams, giving them a platform to perform with a view to then, them sort of taking the next step in their career. John McGinn being an obvious one. And, although it maybe didn't work out the same way, Kyle McGuinness was another sort of, signing of that intent. I think Dan Mackay, Jake Doyle-Hayes. Obviously, they don't all work out the way that the club or the player maybe envisions them, but I think, recruitment at Hibs has not been great in recent seasons. I think that's kind of possibly understatement of the century, but it's obviously something that Malcolm Mackay is working to, kind of sort. And I think, we know it's going to take a while to kind of overhaul the squad. He said that, David Gray said that, and you just have to look at it and it's blatantly obvious as well. But, I think from Kieran Bowie's point of view, obviously, as you say, he's on a lot of clubs' radars at the moment. You look at having 2 loans at Northampton, it kind of makes sense to, from Fulham's point of view, can we send him out on loan to a higher level and see how he copes? Scotland obviously makes sense because of his background, because obviously he started off his career here, and maybe being closer to home, they think that might help, that might make a difference. But I think it's good that, I think, when you look at who Hibs are being linked with and who they brought in, they all make sense. Like, you look at Warren O'Hora, ball playing centre half, Marvin Ekpiteta, no nonsense centre back, Joe Bursick, goalkeeper who's young but not inexperienced and has a point to prove. And I think when you put Kieran Bowie in that bracket, and you think, well, it's you can see why they would potentially be interested. But I think Hibs are sort of very keen to just be sort of working away in the background and not sort of like making a big thing about who they're going for and what type. I mean, everybody and their dog knows what Hibs need. You look at that squad and you think, right, well, they probably need a left back and they probably need a couple of strikers or a couple of forwards. So, I think when you combine that with Malcolm Mackay's sort of contact book throughout, not just UK football, but further afield, and you look at the calibre of player that he was bringing in at Ross County, I think it's, you probably are going to see a few more kind of sensible targets coming out rather than what seems to be kind of, pinning a list at a dartboard and then chucking a dart at it. Or kind of relying a little bit too much on, a player's kind of stats. Or, maybe their, kind of their potential, which, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I don't think you can build your entire recruitment kind of operation around it. They need to be the kind of the 1 or 2 kind of additional ones, or the kind of bonus signings, if you like, not the crux of the whole operation. And I think that's what one of the things that Hibs have needed to do, is one of the things that Malcolm Mackay has kind of been focusing on is just getting the club's recruitment back to a kind of sensible place. Tried and tested, if you like, but players with the right character who have a point to prove, or who are taking the next step in their career, no matter where they are in their career, whether they're like, Marvin Ekpiteta in his late 20s, Warren O'Hora in his mid 20s, or Joe Bursick in his sort of earlier 20s, if you like. So I think it's a target that obviously makes sense, but at the same time, I don't think it's not one of those where it's like it's close to being done or anything. It's certainly a long way from that, and at the moment it is just very much just one who's on the radar. But if this is the type of player Hibs are going after, then I think that probably bodes well for for who they do end up getting in, not just in attack, but in other positions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for your question, Jock, and thank you to everybody who's joined us today. I think we're going to park it there for now. I think we've covered everything, unless I've completely forgotten anything glaring.
Well, if you have, so have I. So.
Yeah. Either way, we're going to leave it there. So, tough luck. Yeah.
That's it. Leave them wanting more, Liam. That's it.
Leave them wanting more, exactly. Don't give too much away. No, as I said, keep your questions coming in for future shows, folks. We do appreciate it, and we do endeavour to get around as many of them as we can. But as I said, for now, we're going to leave it there, but we'll see you very soon. We'll be off to New Central Park this weekend, Hibs against Kelty Hearts. The Premier Sports Cup campaign continuing. Hibs looking to make it 3 wins from 3. and obviously very much favourites to do so. But thank you, as always, for joining us. We're still running a £4 for 4 month subscription offer that gives you access to all our content. And then if you could hit subscribe on the YouTube channel, it helps us to keep on growing this. We've seen a bit of an uptick over the summer, so we do appreciate everybody who's come on board with us. I think that's all, folks. Cheers for joining us, and we'll catch you again very soon.